You're listening to the Spare No Arrows podcast, a show that equips Christians to stand against our anti-Christian culture. My name's Cody Lawrence, and I'm here to discuss culture, politics, theology, and building Christendom for the glory of God with courage, biblical truth, and sound doctrine. A lot of people have been asking me about my opinion on the Joel Webbon document that was released. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, I will give a brief explanation of kind of the things that have been revealed and how we should approach it, the things that we ought to consider with these new revelations. And if it's good to criticize these things, to bring up past sins, or if it's a bad thing. And my opinion, I think, is pretty unique. I haven't heard, I think, a single other person share my exact thoughts about the situation. I know they're out there. But after I kind of explain the history of it, I will share my thoughts and my approach and how I think Christians ought to approach this thing. So here's what happened. After about it seems like at least a year of research, this fellow named Eli McGowan, he is on Twitter, or on X, he released this article based on a document that was released from Joel Webbon's previous elders at his church before he left California. So Joel Webbon is this pastor that I have talked about before, who in his small niche of the Reformed world has been picking up steam lately. If you haven't seen those previous videos about him from me, you should probably go check those out before watching this one, especially the one in particular called Is Joel Webbon a Wolf, or the Best Evangelicalism Has to Offer? And that kind of sums up my opinions about Joel. This document is something else, though, and it's interesting. And so I'm going to try to give as objective a perspective on the document as possible. So basically, Joel's previous elders in 2023, I believe, at the very end of 2023, so just over a year ago, this happened relatively recently, had some pretty serious concerns about Joel Webbon and Right Response Ministries. And they consisted of various concerns, like mainly it was an accusation that he is not qualified for pastoral ministry for various reasons because of personal interactions they've had with him over the years, being their elders and co-pastoring with him, that he was not above reproach and that he was arrogant and had a pattern of arrogance and a pattern of not being above reproach and other basically lacking fundamental pastoral qualifications. And some particular interesting details that were new information for most people was the fact that Joel Webbon created Right Response Ministries originally as a ministry of the church that he used to be a part of. And he, through various apparent deceptions, grew this ministry. And then when he left the church, he took the ministry with him. And the ministry, they basically paid, the church paid for the ministry out of their tithes. It was not Joel Webbon's ministry, although many times he claimed to have built it himself. And so essentially the idea that this document gives is that Right Response Ministries was essentially stolen. It's stolen property from this previous church that he was a part of. He grew this ministry that was supposed to be a ministry of his old church, and then he took it with him, completely severing the ties with Right Response Ministries and the old church to this day. And then started telling people that he built it himself and so on. And there are more details about these things, but this is just the accusation. And so after this, I'm going to share a kind of Joel's what he said about it next, his response, and then I'll share my thoughts. But the other accusation was that Joel, very early in his ministry, about maybe 10 years ago or so, he slept with a church member. This was before he was married. It was while he called himself a pastor. So he was a pastor of this church, and he had sex with a church member. He wasn't married to her. It was adultery. And then at the time, they were looking to join Acts 29. And through the Acts 29 process to basically like validate the church as an Acts 29 church, Joel lied to Acts 29 about his pastoral qualifications and about being above reproach and about the sex stuff. And then they validated him to be a pastor in Acts 29, which he has since left a long time ago. Or, I mean, more recently, rather. Not a long time ago. It was maybe a couple of years ago, at least. Now, but it was a long time ago relative to now. But it was a long time after he was in Acts 29 for a long time. But anyway, his church was validated basically on a lie, and Right Response Ministries was built essentially on a lie. He continued lying about those things. And in Joel's response, one of the things that he said was he actually revealed to people like the board members of Right Response Ministries, A.D. Robles, who is a board member of Right Response Ministries, says he knew this, and it's not a big deal because Joel told everybody about it. Gabe Wrench from Moscow actually was asked to be on and expressed that, like, yeah, Joel has been very transparent about these things, so he wasn't lying about them. So basically, the bounce back about this sleeping with a church member thing was that it has been resolved. It's in the past. It's not important anymore. He has repented of it. He's been faithfully married for however many years, whatever. And so therefore we should forget that thing. And also the whole rest of the article that Eli wrote is also probably trash and lies, and let's ignore that too. So that's kind of the response. And then other people, like our favorite hothead, Eric Kahn, posts something like, if you dredge up people's past sins, you're satanic. Yep, something like that. And I thought that was interesting. I mean, one, it's interesting to see the kinds of people who are defending Joel and the kinds of people who are on his team. Because at the end of this video, it's going to be very interesting after the conclusions that I draw to see who are allies with Joel, because that's going to be very revelatory about their character as well. People who knew about this, people who know about this kind of behavior, and who continue to defend him, reveal something about their character. If it's good or bad, we'll find out soon. But one interesting kind of, I love pointing out hypocrisy in people's comments. Basically, he said dredging up past sins is satanic, it's evil, it's bad. You shouldn't dredge up people's past sins and accuse them. That's accuser behavior, and Satan is the accuser. But here's the thing. Now let's talk through this. Let's use reason, critical thinking to think through this statement. Every sin, a second after it is committed, is a past sin. There is not a single sin in the world that we can discuss that is not a past sin. And so the language of saying accusing somebody of a past sin is satanic is fundamentally either deceptive or it is not clear to the point where it like might as well be deceptive. It's not the kind of thing a pastor should be saying, especially in a context like this. I mean, because this is like an important thing that actually really does matter. The question that we should ask ourselves not is, does past sins matter? Because of course they do. Obviously they do. God lists qualifications for pastors, and every single one of those qualifications requires us to judge a pastor's past behavior. The real question that we should be asking ourselves in a situation like this is not that we shouldn't dredge up people's past sins, but it is, has somebody adequately repented for those past sins? To dredge up a person's past sins that have been repented of and forgiven is bad. I wouldn't necessarily call it satanic. I don't know that that's what Satan does. What's actually a lot closer to what Satan does, like Satan did in the garden and like Satan did with Jesus in the desert, is Satan actually tells you true things. Satan gives you facts, but those facts are in a context that is deceptive and makes you think the opposite of what's true. So Satan is, was an angel of light. Satan reveals himself as something good and something attractive, and essentially twists truth, makes something seem true when really it's not, and really he's guiding you in a very bad, awful direction. So that's really what Satan does. And so I don't know if that's the case, and Eric Kahn is actually being deceptive here with his vague words. That's actually a lot closer to what Satan does than dredging up people's past sins that may or may not have actually been repented of. I can't think of a single example in the Bible of Satan actually doing that to anybody. Anyway, which is also something that a pastor should be aware of. But I don't know, if you don't have a seminary education. I don't think Eric Kahn has a seminary education. Not that you need one, but if you're not educated, and if you're not a part of a denomination, and if you don't have any kind of denominational or presbytery structure to hold you accountable, other than just your bros that you're co-pastoring with, you could probably fall into some deep crap with your theology, like I think what Eric Kahn has done. But anyway, that's beside the point. The real question that we should be asking ourselves is, has Joel repented of these sins? And honestly, evidently Joel's previous church has said that he has given them money from Right Response Ministries, and he's tried to make it right. He gave them a larger sum of money than what they asked for, something like that. And Joel has been, hopefully, presumably, faithfully married to his wife. Not cheating on her. We don't know these things. I mean, he might be. He might have slept with more than one woman. This might just be the one woman that we know about. But either way, these things are important considerations, at least, to be able to discuss in determining if a pastor is qualified. And now, if this were a private matter, one of the things that pops up often in the comments whenever, some celebrity or micro trash celebrity pastor like Joel Webbon, celebrity is a much too grandiose term for whatever Joel Webbon is. But whenever this happens, people inevitably come out and say, well, who are you to criticize? This is their private business. This is their private church, whatever. And the reason that this is important for us to actually consider is that Joel has intentionally put himself in a public position. And so if people, leave comments and they criticize me, you're actually doing exactly the same thing. What business is it of you to criticize my personal opinions? Well, actually, you're allowed to, because I'm putting my opinions publicly for you to criticize. That is the cost of having a public ministry. That is the cost of putting your thoughts publicly online. So just like you're allowed to criticize me, I'm also allowed to criticize pastors who have public ministries who I believe are going off the rails. And so it seems like Joel has done a lot to make these things right. The sleeping with the other church member and the stealing Right Response Ministries essentially from his other church. So here's my opinion now about the document as a whole that was released. And this is the unique thing. This is the thing that I think most people don't. Most people were blown away by the sex thing, and it's like, Joel, step down right now, because you're disqualified forever, or whatever. I don't think necessarily a person is disqualified forever for having disqualifying behavior. I think if they actually have repented of that behavior, I guess depending on what it is, I suppose, and if they have demonstrated themselves with enough time that and being surrounded by actual wise, other qualified elders who can actually affirm these things, has actually demonstrated themselves as being faithful and being pastorally, biblically qualified now, after enough time has passed, then I think they can still become a pastor. And we even see these things happening in the Bible, like Paul was not qualified for ministry at all. And then Jesus himself brought Paul to repentance. Paul had this repentance moment, and Jesus called Paul to pastor many churches. And so just from the Bible, I think we need to, I've seen a lot of people saying like Joel can never be a pastor ever because of these things he did. I don't think that's necessarily true. And the sex thing, because it happened so long ago, and because, let's just give him as much grace as absolutely possible and say, sure, he did actually repent of this, and he actually did pay back and make the stealing right response ministries thing from his past church totally right. Let's just say that's true. I'm not really concerned about those things, interestingly. This is kind of the unique opinion that I'm not seeing a lot of other people say. The document didn't actually tell us anything that we didn't already know, except for the specific details. So if you've seen my previous video about Joel Webbon, using Joel Webbon's own words, he is disqualified from ministry. I believe Joel is pretending to be a pastor. I believe he's a fake pastor. I believe Joel is just as much of a pastor as a woman behind the pulpit, which is not at all. So in fact, it might even be worse than most women behind the pulpit, because I think most women aren't like maliciously ignoring what the Bible says about pastoral qualifications. They really justify it, probably, hopefully in a lot of cases, with, well, I wouldn't say with their heart in the right place, but let's say ignorantly. They ignorantly go behind the pulpit in disobedience. But I think Joel does know better. Joel often talks about pastoral qualifications and how women are not qualified to be pastors. Joel has often talked about disqualified pastors in the past, and he is one of them, which to me seems worse than, because he's not only a disqualified pastor, but he's also a hypocrite. Most women are just disqualified pastors, right? And that's not to, I'm not minimizing the sin of a woman being behind the pulpit. Both of those are actually very major sins. That's one of the worst things a person can possibly do, I think, be a disqualified pastor and continue to preach behind the pulpit. It's one of the absolute worst and most accursed positions a person could find themselves in, which is why the Bible says, not many of you should be teachers in James, because those who are teachers will be judged more strictly. But Joel is that, and he's also a hypocrite because he has spent so much time talking about false teachers in the past. And so the things that I'm actually the most interested about is this long history of arrogance and not being above reproach and lying and so on. Essentially, all of the things that I listed in my original Joel Webbon video from months ago were confirmed by this document from Joel's previous elders. Now, another fun fact, something that happened was Joel was put under church discipline, essentially, and they wanted him to step back from ministry, and you can read all this in the document. The elders laid this out. They wanted him to step back from ministry, and Joel said he would, and during that time that he was supposed to be stepping back from ministry, Joel was actually preparing to plant his Texas church. And so he actually never did step back from ministry. He never submitted to biblical authority for any of his bad behavior. And either due to his position or his reputation or from pressure from other organizations, they have kind of backed off on Joel and rekindled their relationship with him, his previous church. But that is irrelevant compared to this history of disqualifying pastoral behavior. Here's another interesting thing about any of this, but interestingly about the sex thing. Let's just say Joel has faithfully been married to his wife, whatever. The question, Gabe Wrench replied to me on Twitter whenever I posted something about Joel. Gabe replied and said that Joel revealed this to me when I was going to be on his board, and he was very transparent about this. And so the question that I asked that Gabe never responded to, but I'm very curious about the answer to this question. And I'm sure he won't respond because I think he's trying to, probably rightfully so, keep himself out of the situation and maintain some kind of semblance of a positive relationship, even though I don't think he should be doing that because Joel is a snake. But I asked Gabe, so do you think, one of my first questions was, do you think that Joel should have stepped down when he had sex with this church member outside of marriage while he was a pastor? Do you think Joel should have stepped down? And Gabe said yes. But he made it right. He repented of that, whatever, yada, yada. And so my follow-up question that was never answered, and I haven't to this day gotten a satisfying answer from any of them, any of the Joel supporters. I'm not saying Gabe is a Joel supporter. I'm a Gabe Wrench fan, but I didn't get a response, and it's probably because my question is too good. It's probably because I'm actually getting to the core of an important issue here. So if Joel was supposed to step down when he was, 10 years ago after he had sex with this church member, if the biblical consequence, if what a person is supposed to do if they commit a certain kind of sin is a certain consequence, in this case stepping down from the role of being a pastor, and they refuse to do so, the question is that a sin? Is it a sin to avoid the just and biblical consequences for your actions? I think yes. And so, because if Joel, so let's say he has made the sin of sleeping with the woman right. Let's just say that that's true. Like I said, I don't really care about the particular sin. I think it's entirely possible that he could be faithfully married, and none of that matters anymore. So I am not dredging up this potentially repented of sin. What I am curious about is, at what point, how many years does it take before it becomes okay for Joel to sweep the consequences of that sin under the rug? That's the question that I've never gotten an answer to. If somebody avoids the consequences of their sin, for example, Joel lied to Acts 29 and to many, many people. And in fact, after that, he lied in various ways to thousands of people because he has a public ministry, verifiably lied. And you can apologize for certain lies, or you could say oh, well, I lied, whatever. The consequence of lies to that magnitude and about that kind of thing was for the purpose of avoiding stepping down from ministry. So my question is, at what point does that just become okay? At what point can a person say, to this very day, I'm lying about this, but because it happened 10 years ago, I don't have to step down anymore. Because it's fine, even though I've been lying this whole time. Even though, does that make sense? So the sin is the deception now, and it is avoiding the consequence of the original sin. If Jonah ran away from God and didn't want to go to Nineveh to preach, that's one thing. But then if he continues running away, so he's not only guilty of the sin of not preaching in Nineveh, but he's also guilty for the sin of running away from what God commands him to do. There's two sins happening. And then there's also the sins of lying that, Jonah is actually a far better person than Joel, because Jonah actually faced the consequences of his sin and got swallowed by a whale. And actually, arguably, I think that's exactly what's happening now with Joel. Joel has continued to exhibit this childish, emotional, disqualifying behavior. Just a couple days ago, it's like I used to bring up Joel more often in the podcast, and I've stopped. I've not been interested in talking about him because it's so blatantly obvious that he's disqualified now. I think I've done my work. I've done absolutely everything I can to reveal to reasonable people that Joel is disqualified as a pastor. And so I can wash my hands of this, because it's like the people who aren't convinced at this point, who have seen the evidence, I think they're just too far gone. I think the people who know all the evidence and see all the stuff that Joel has done and don't think that he's at this point disqualified after actually being sincere about the evidence, they're just blind. They blindly want to follow Joel, or whatever the reason is. It sucks. But yeah, just a couple days ago, he said something like about the trash world, after the trash world conference, he said something like, women are going to learn to be submissive, or they're going to be alone. Deus Vult. Which is funny. It's hilarious behavior, especially because at the Trash World Conference, they had a tremendously difficult time getting enough women to come for their stupid singles event at the end of the conference. I wonder why, because all of these people blatantly hate women. Joel Webbon himself has said that he doesn't think women should be in the public sphere at all. He actually said that. Speaking of, I was talking with Carrie Smith from her program, Deprogrammed, which you should check out my episode with her if you haven't yet. But we talked about the similarities between the woke right theology and Islam theology. They think women shouldn't be in the public spheres. And I'm not saying head coverings are not biblical, but there is a very close connection. In other words, before I say this, let me qualify this. I am not opposed to the idea of head coverings. I don't buy into that myself personally, but there are plenty of people in my church who do subscribe to a physical head covering, and that's totally cool with me. I don't care, really. That's a totally valid, I think, interpretation of the text. I think it's incorrect, but I think it's you can be faithful and believe that there is a physical head covering. Cool, that's fine. But the connection that I want to make is with Islam, where Islam requires physical cloth head coverings. They want women to stay out of the public sphere. They think people can lie and deceive towards their enemies, towards the infidels, to bring about the world that they're trying to bring about. They love tyranny, like we talked about in the word study episode last episode. They love, it's like they worship the same demon god, the woke right and Islam. And it's fascinating to see the connections that are drawn between the two religions, because I think it's exactly the same religion. They love tyranny and control because they worship the god of tyranny and control, not the loving, just, merciful God of the Bible. Not that God. They worship an entirely, totally different God, and I'm afraid that this is the direction that Joel Webbon is going. But the thing that I was going to bring up was he has continued this childish, silly behavior, like Hillary Crowder, the woman who was, I don't know how the situation has gone, but I think was married to Steven Crowder. So I was a member of the Mug Club a few years ago. I used to really appreciate Steven Crowder. I appreciated him less the bigger he got. I think like a lot of arrogance entered in, probably was revealed. It was probably there the whole time. But he revealed a lot of arrogance and a lot of just like vitriol and some character stuff that I really didn't like. And so I stopped watching Steven Crowder. But I supported him a lot over the years. And then this video was released. I had stopped supporting Steven Crowder at the time. And allegations of mistreating his employees, and two of his employees that I liked, they quit, and basically his entire staff is turned over. But then this video released of him going insane at his wife, and somebody evidently hacked into their home security cameras and leaked this video on the internet. And then they got divorced. And I'm not saying that Hillary wasn't necessarily doing nothing sinful in the situation. I don't know the situation. But the truth is, Stephen was an awful husband. That was blatantly obvious from his behavior and from this video that was released. There's absolutely no justification for how he treated his wife there. I'm not saying that was justifiable for them to get a divorce. I don't know who initiated the divorce, if it was her or him. I want to say it was him. I think he hired a divorce attorney, and then maybe they both amicably decided to get a divorce. I don't know what the situation was. But the point is, I'm not saying she's necessarily the good guy in the situation, but I am saying that Stephen undoubtedly is the bad guy. They might both be bad guys. But I didn't even know this was the same Hillary Crowder. And so I follow her on X, and I noticed that she has been posting a lot of good stuff. And she saw Joel's post about you're going to be alone if you aren't, quiet, if you don't have a quiet and gentle spirit, you're going to be alone. And she called Joel Webbon a dork. She's like, Joel, I'm going to say this in the most gentle and respectful way possible. You're a dork. Which was really funny, and I agree with that. And the irony is, they had a tremendously difficult time finding women for their group. They go around saying women shouldn't be in the public sphere. They deeply care about the oppression of women. They think women shouldn't make incomes, regardless of what the Proverbs 31 woman did. The most faithful woman in the Bible ran a business, had employees, went to the marketplace, was a public figure. And for some reason, this group of woke right idiots think women shouldn't have incomes. How is that in the Bible? You can be family focused and home focused, which a woman should absolutely be, and have an income at the same time. Anyway, but of course women aren't going to show up to your events, and because you say things like this, you're going to be alone, women. The fact is, women actually have a lot easier of a time finding a man than a man finding a woman. That's just how this works. So actually, this seems like projection, his annoying, group of obnoxious, laser-eyed keyboard warrior anon goons. They're probably not very attractive to the female crowd. They're probably, not only morally, but I bet physically, probably just not generally attractive people. And a good portion of them are unmarried and they're miserable. Speaking of which, the two heroes of the woke right movement, the hosts of the Stone Choir podcast, they're both unmarried. Whoa, that one of the hosts, I just learned today, was divorced, and his wife is a liberal now. She's like a flaming woke person, and I wonder why that is. If you made the awful mistake of marrying someone like him, it would totally make sense that you would go, trampoline in completely the opposite direction and become a raging leftist. So of course that happened. Of course his wife became a leftist. Anyway, but this is the kind of people that they are. These are the heroes of their movement. A lot of them love Stone Choir, and it's despicable. But anyway, Joel's response to Hillary saying kind of dorky, this thing you just said, Joel. You're a dork. Sorry. Kind of, funny, playful is how it came across to me. Joel's response was, "How's your marriage?" Yikes. That offended a lot of people. A lot of people are like, all right, here's one more reason why Joel's disqualified. This kind of emotional behavior, what gives a pastor the right to publicly attack? He thinks women shouldn't even be on social media because these guys, somebody shared with me the idea that these guys think, which this is a very childish, small boyish thing to believe, but it's like they think social media is a war zone. And biblically speaking, women shouldn't be in war zones. So therefore, women shouldn't be on social media. I think that's super childish. That's not what social media is. That's what these people are trying to turn it into, and that's bad. But the logic follows, if social media is a war zone, then women shouldn't be on social media. But also, if if men shouldn't compete with women in sports, or if like there's a woman and then there's a trans man, in other words, a man pretending to be a woman, that woman shouldn't compete, right? It's honorable to say, I'm not going to participate in this bad thing. And so if Joel truly believes, if Joel is a good man, and he believes that you shouldn't fight women, publicly insulting a woman because of an awful tragedy that she went through, in response to her making a joke about you, calling you a dork, of all the insults, dork is probably one of the most hilarious insults. Like, it's funny. Of all of the insults, for Joel to respond to the insult of being called a dork by publicly attacking her through a awful tragedy that she went through is beyond the pale. It's disgusting. It's one of the least manly things I can think of. It's emotional. It's pathetic. It's contradictory, because he has this view that women shouldn't be in the public sphere, or you shouldn't fight women. You need to be a big masculine man. And yet he goes around insulting women. How effeminate is that? So anyway, all that to say is this document that came out about Joel, I think it only revealed to us things that we already knew. I was shocked when I saw the stealing right response ministries allegation and the sleeping with a church member thing, and the thing that I thought to myself was, oh, this makes perfect sense. It wasn't some huge revelation. It wasn't like, wow, Joel's disqualified. No, it's like, this is big, because it's going to open a lot of people's eyes to this stuff who maybe wasn't aware before. And also, it's going to cause people to double down and support Joel. And that's exactly what's happening. So people like the Ogden guys, people like anybody who went to the Trash World conference defending Joel. Some people, like I think Steve Deese is kind of like hands off on the situation. He just went because he was invited. He has had conversations with Joel and on his show, but also is pretty outspoken that like anti-Semitism is garbage, and the stuff that kind of Joel has been pushing is stupid. But Steve went to the show anyway, or went to the conference, and they wanted Steve to go to the conference anyway, and that's fine. So I'm not saying every single person that went to the conference is a Joel supporter and bad or whatever. I'm not saying that. But I am saying the people who are defending Joel, who actually do know all the details, and they're still defending his qualification as a pastor after all of this stuff is revealed, after seeing this kind of behavior, there's something missing from those people. People who think it is okay to publicly attack a woman's divorce. Like, I don't know much about Hillary Crowder, but the stuff, and like I said, I followed her before I even knew who she was, just because she posted good stuff. Like, she seems like a faithful lady. I don't know if she is or not, but to attack a person like that and use a tragedy that she went through, who knows if she was the bad guy in the situation or not? I don't know. They could both be bad guys. But that is, it's despicable. It's gross. And stuff like that, and just ongoing, the stuff that Joel Webbon continues to say, just continually proves that he's disqualified. And his supporters are doubling down on this. And I think a lot of them are just beyond reason. And so we need to, those of us on our side, at least here's the position that I'm taking now with all this stuff. Like I said earlier, I think, the evidence is out there. The best we can do is just try to live in unity with these people, try to convince them that they're wrong. Don't let them corrupt good stuff with their garbage. If you know these people personally or whatever, don't let them spread their crap. But it's like, that's just how these people are going to be now. Joel is disqualified, and he's a massive danger, but I think it's like the evidence is clear. I think he's less dangerous now than ever, because his group of stupid supporters are really doubling down and entrenching themselves and becoming more and more divisive with everybody else. And then everybody else is kind of seeing more and more clearly how bad these people are. And so, yeah, it's just becoming more obvious. So it's like, I've done my work. I've helped people realize how crazy these people are. And, we can have conversations, but you're not going to convince me that Joel's qualified all of a sudden, because there's literally a decade of evidence. There's a decade of evidence. Every week, Joel says something that a pastor shouldn't say. He proves, it's not like a pastor can't slip up ever. It's not like saying one thing, like, oh, this one comment, that's disqualifying. That's not it at all. We have 10 years of stuff like this. We have 10 years of lies. We have 10 years of deception. We have 10 years of being above reproach, not being above reproach. We have evidence of him abandoning or trying to avoid ecclesial, good, just ecclesial authority, trying to discipline him. He's avoided that. He avoided the discipline from Acts 29 when he lied to them about his pastoral qualifications. It's like from the very beginning of his ministry, he's been doing nothing but lying and deceiving. And he continues to do that to this day. Joel Webbon has personally lied about me. Because he hates it when people criticize him, obviously, because he'll send the most vitriolic, awful attacks at you if you call him something like a dork. So anyway, that's where we're at. I probably won't be talking about Joel too much, but if you follow me on X, I'll share interesting stuff occasionally, or if something egregiously crazy, which happens often with Joel, happens, I might mention something on a podcast episode in the future. But as far as I'm concerned, because of this document, the case is closed. There's no more convincing that needs to be done. This is as obvious as it could possibly be. So feel free to share my content. Other people are making content about Joel Webbon and how dangerous and disqualified he is. A lot of people are catching on to this. Here's my wish. I wish, because this is so obvious at this point, that more pastors who are or were associated with him, who disagrees with the direction that he was going, would speak out more and name names. Instead of attacking the ideology, I think now it's just time to say, yeah, Joel is a disqualified pastor. You shouldn't follow him. And I think bigger name people ought to do that. Other big podcasts, just to make it more obvious to people at this point. And then, it's like no discussion. These are facts. It's obvious now. But as always, feel free to disagree in the comments. And if you're, especially if you're one of the vile, vitriolic, bad at arguing Joel Webbon supporters, please leave comments to show people how right I am. But also, if you're a reasonable person that actually cares to interact with my arguments, then feel free to do that too. I would love to hear your perspective sincerely, because I'm not a psychopath. I actually care about truth. So feel free to disagree, and I will catch you in the next episode. God bless.